In this video, we're going to be creating the magnet beam. The magnet beam gives Mega Man the ability to create temporary platforms to let him reach places that he's not able to normally get to with his existing environment. So let's take a look at the original game real quick, the magnet beam in action. And what it'll do is it creates this beam, basically kind of like a strobe. But if we stop and go back real quick and step through it, here's the catch. Alright, so the beam is broken in segments, and this is basically like one of those segments. And what it'll do is it comes back towards him and then it'll wrap around. And the longer he holds down his button, basically then the beam will grow and creating more segments. Trying to replicate this actually it was not working out because of the timing, and the longer the beam got, the longer it would take for it to get back to him, and it just didn't look right. So I ended up actually doing it the way that the Mega Man Maker does. So we're going to take a look at that in a sec. Okay, so let's take a look at how the Mega Man Maker magnet beam works, how the segments react in that game. So this is a little video that I found on YouTube. So this part where it's 3 long, it's the same. It'll basically strobe one by one. And I think it skips frames, but if we play it, when it gets longer, like here, it doesn't do like the original Mega Man, which is fine. What it'll do is it'll basically go 1, skip 2, and then another. So when it gets to basically 4 and longer, it'll wrap around, kind of creating like a conveyor belt type look. So that's what we're going to basically do in ours. So let's take a look at the one that we have, that we're going to have at the end of this session. And we're going to kill that guy, and we're going to collect the magnet beam right there. And we're just going to get past these bullets. And we're going to switch over to the magnet beam, and we're going to create a platform. And it'll disappear just like the original. So the longer I hold this down, the longer the beam will get. And if I move around with it, it'll follow my shoot position. And if I let it go, I can jump up on top of it, I can jump through it, get back up on it. So it's not solid until I'm above it. And let's take a look at the strobe. So it's probably better if I look at it over here. So this is probably 12 long. And so it'll go 1, skip 2, 1, skip 2, 1, etc. So if I step through it, it'll be moving forward. Actually, I think it's more than 12. So it's basically an animation that keeps repeating. It'll do the 1, and then it'll go to the previous 2 frames, move it forward, so it gives it the look of that kind of a look, that type of an effect. So it actually is pretty good. So we can make these platforms, and then get back where we were started off. We can make a really long one. And if I shrink this out, basically the longest one that I have will go 30 long. Oops. And then we get that across the platform. And if we collect weapon energy, it'll refill, as you saw. And that's what we're basically going to do in this video. So stop there and let's get started. So the end of the, well, not at the end, but during the last video, when we were creating the hyperbomb, and we created the hyperbomb function, I had made reference to removing the key shoot release time, which actually, after the fact, I kind of realized, oops, I kind of forgot to flesh this out a little bit more, because it should just be like shooting the Mega Buster. So by not having that, if you actually held down the shoot key when the bomb was done exploding, it would throw a bomb right away again, which we don't actually want. We want him to actually, the player to release the shoot key and then press it again to be able to throw another bomb. So I had already updated the code. It's already been uploaded to GitHub last week. But in case you didn't see it or you need to make the change, then you can refer here. So I'm just going to show the function that's the altered function that has the release time. So it's looking for the shoot key to be released before a bomb can be thrown again. So basically this is the function. So if you need to, you can update, if you see any differences in your code versus here, you can update those. And then down here, and then this is basically, I think it's pretty much this section right here, and then some of it in here too. So you can update your function. So I just want to get to that first before we move on to what we're going to be doing with the magnet beam in this video. So that said, we're going to open up the project. This is the previous project, which was the hyper bomb from when we collected from defeating Bomb Man. So we're going to be creating the magnet beam now. So to create the magnet beam, I actually have a sprite sheet that I ended up creating. And the way this is going to work is, let me zoom in here. So the way this works is it's going to be an animation that kind of goes in a loop depending on how long the beam segments are. When I was creating this and trying to figure out how the easiest way to create it was, I was thinking I could have maybe a parent game object and a bunch of segments as children and cycle through them. And the longer the beam would get, I would keep adding to it. But keeping track of what's going to be toggled on and what's going to be toggled off, I felt was, kind of a pain in the butt to actually deal with. So what I ended up doing was I created this giant sprite sheet starting down here with one beam. The next lineup would be 2 beams, 3 beams, 4 beams, etc., going all the way up to having 30 beams at the most, or 30 segments. So what it'll do is, just taking, for instance, 30 segments here, it'll play the 31st, and then it'll go down here and then do 28, 29, 30, and it'll constantly loop between these. So you see it'll fill this gap because it'll basically move. It'll be like this one's here, and then when it plays the next frame, it'll be here, and then on the last frame, it'll play here, and it'll just start over. So that's what basically creates the effect that we're looking to achieve. And so I'm going to close that for right now. So before we import the graphic and everything, there will be some changes that we want to make. First change that we're going to do actually just has to do with the transitions. The transitions that we have that alter the camera movement and everything like that. I'm just going to extend these out just a little bit, just so that we'll get to this later. But if you actually play, you do a beam and it's long here, and you happen to make it past, and the beam, and you jump off the beam, or the beam disappears and you fall past this transition, the camera's not going to move. So I don't actually account for that little bit of a, it's not a bug, but it's just something to keep in mind when now you're creating platforms, and the platforms can basically go wherever you want. It's just something that you have to keep in mind when you're building this out. So I'm just going to make them a little bit longer, and then we're going to do the other things. So with these 3 highways, 0, 1, and 2 selected under our transitions parent, we're going to alter the box collider dimensions. So on the X, for the offset, we're going to make that 0.5, and then we're going to leave the Y at 0.48. The size are going to change on the X to 2, and we're going to leave the Y on 0.04. So it just makes them a little bit, oops, yeah, I lost them. It just makes them a little bit longer. I mean, you don't even really have to do it if you don't want to. You can actually extend them out even further if you wanted to. The only one you're going to have a problem with that is if you extend this one out, which actually does the pause in the camera transition, and you're on a box here and you jump up, it'll pause as he's jumping up and then pause again as he's coming back down to hit that transition over and over. So you'd really have to technically kind of, once you get past this, disable it so it doesn't happen anymore. So, but like I said, that's something that you can take into account and do work on your own if you'd like. So, next thing what we're going to do is we need to create a new tag and a new layer. And so we're going to go up here to this layers button up here, and we're going to click on edit layers. And I'm just going to get this out of the way for right now. So right now, these are all of our current layers. Our last layer was the weapon layer, and then our last tag that we created was the bomb. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a new tag, and it's going to be called platform beam. So we're going to create a tag called platform beam, and then we're going to add a new layer on number 13 called magnet beam. So those are our new tag and new layer. Okay, so we can get out of that. So now what we're going to do is we're going to edit the collision matrix. So we're going to go up to Edit Menu, Project Settings, and then go over to Physics 2D, scroll down, and now we have our magnet beam layer here. So what we're going to do is we don't want the magnet beam to collide with other magnet beams. We don't want it to touch weapons. We don't want it to collide with items. And this is the Mega Man Maker. Basically, you can actually put up a platform, and if it happens to have an enemy underneath it, the enemy will land on top of it instead of going through it. I haven't actually tested that out in my version, but I'm not going to let enemies basically land on top of the platform. So I don't want I'm going to turn that off. So the only thing that I'm going to have on here is the player being able to get onto the magnet beam, and then they'll solve all these other items here. So the player is going to be the only one that can have a solid magnet beam. So then we're going to close that. And then what we're going to do is, let me see here. We're going to alter our player. So let's bring this over real quick, and we can actually shrink this up a little bit. So right now, if I zoom in here, you can see that our bullet shoot position, I don't know, I think it was supposed to be here, but for some reason it's over here. There might have been a change somewhere in one of the other videos, I can't remember. But I think it's normally underneath in the bottom middle. But right now, this is the bullet shoot position, and it'll update when we switch to shooting. So it'll move there. But the problem is if we get hit and we're extending a magnet beam, it's going to basically push the magnet beam down here. And what it's going to do is, because magnet beams can collide, they stop moving or they lock themselves into place when they hit grounds and walls. It's basically going to lock the beam when we don't want it to get locked. So what we're going to do is we're going to solve that, and actually what I should have did in the very first video, but it never really came up until now, is we're going to alter our bullet shoot position's default position for the prefab of our player. So we're going to open up our prefab, so go to the prefabs players and player, open that up, and on our bullet shoot position, we're going to alter the X to 0.12 and the Y to 0.13. Now we can't see him because he's hiding somewhere around here. So he's in and out, there he is. So let's zoom in here. So this is going to be our default position for our bullet shooting spot. So I'm going to switch it over here to like hit, and if I preview it, it's still right there. So if we get hit, and the thing about when you get hit and you have the magnet beam extended, you'll stay with you, and you'll just go back to the shooting. So if you play the original, he doesn't lose the bullet. He doesn't lose the magnet beam because he gets hit by a bullet or by an enemy. So it'll stay with him. So, and if we go to run shoot and we preview that, then you can see that's not where it's supposed to be. But if we go to shoot, that's all right. Run shoot. Anyway, I was checking it, and I don't remember putting it there. I could have swore that I put the bullet shoot position like right at the end of the barrel here, but I suppose, because I went back towards the beginning of the projects just to check it out, and I guess somewhere along the line I might have altered it, or, I didn't look at the first one, but anyway, it still works regardless, so it's just kind of weird that it's over here now. Anyway, Bullet shoot position. So on anything like here, it should be 0.12 and 0.13. So that's going to be the default position for it. So we're going to save that, and we're going to get out of the prefab. And the thing about it is not going to carry over to the one in our scene. So we're going to highlight him, expand that, go to the bullet shoot position, and put the same position. So 0.12 on the X and 0.13 on the Y. So then you can save that one too. All right, so that's altering the bullet shoot position so it's not at his feet anymore. All right, so then what we're going to do is we're going to import the graphic. So what I'm going to do is, now you can go up, if you look in the description of the video, you can see a link to my GitHub. And what you're going to want to do is go into the project, go to the assets folder, graphics, and they're going to find the file called, let me get rid of these. You're going to find the file called magnetbeam.png. And what you're going to probably want to do, if you want to save yourself the time of having to draw out all each individual animation or each frame that we're going to be using, you can download the meta file too, because that's what I'm going to do here. So I'm going to just right click on one of these inside of my graphics folder and just show and explorer. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy these two files here, and I'm going to paste them into that folder. And there they are. Now if I come back over to my project, there's my magnet beam, and it's already set up for me. So I'm just going to bring this out of the way. So I sure have it on point no filter, no compression, and sprite mode multiple. So if we go to the editor and we toggle this up here, you can see all the lines here. So starting at the bottom. So you're basically, if you want to draw it out, which, if you want to learn how to do that, you can draw a rectangle around each one of these. And so it's basically going to go 1, and then you go 2, 3, 4. And it's always going to be all the way up to the left side, and then right up to the end of that line. So I'm just going to go through these one by one so you can see the, because you can basically, it's all the same. They're all the same width, which is 16, and they're all the same height, which is 6. So it's just each time you go 1, you're just adding on 6 and 16. So if I start at 0 and I name them all like magnet beam underscore 00, and the next one would be 01, all the way up here to 29. And then the pivots on all of these is going to be left center. And so starting with the first one, our X is going to be 0, our Y is 0, our width is 16, our height is 6. We go to the next one, it's going to be magnet beam 01, and then it's going to be X0, Y6, width 32, because now it's twice as long, and the same height of 6. And we go to the third one. I'm not going to sound these out. I'm just going to click through them one by one. You can pause and create them as you go. You just basically draw, you just drag a square, and then you can just edit the properties of it. And then next, so that's the third one, fourth one, fifth one, sixth, seventh, 8, 9, 10. So that's 10 segments long. And then we're going to go 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, and 20 segments long. So you'll notice that even though I say 20, it's 19, it's because I started with 0, 0 down here. And so the next one is going to be 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, and last but not least, 30. So that's 30 segments long. Now, I really don't know how long the magnet beam does get in the original game. I couldn't really figure it out because it goes beyond the screen length, and I can't really tell because it doesn't have the gaps. It's just the one beam that goes in a circle. So I decided to make mine 30 long. If for some reason you want to make it longer, then you just basically have to just expand the sheet out, add in the segments. You can copy it in your paint program and draw them in there. It's all equal numbers distance between them because they're all 16, 6 high, 16 wide. So you can basically just follow the same pattern to create 31, etc. and on. So that is creating our sprite sheet that we're going to use for the magnet beam. So we can close out of that. No, we don't want to do any changes to it. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to create the game object for it. So what we're going to do over here in our list of game objects here, we're going to right click and we're going to create an empty. And over here on the transform, we're going to reset that so everything's back at 0 except for the scale. Scale we're going to change to 1.5 and 1.5 on the X and the Y. And we're going to rename it to platform beam. And then what we're going to do is we're going to default tag it to platform beam, but we're not going to do anything with the layer. We'll get to the layer part later when we actually build out the script. And because Mega Man is solid, or him in the layer, basically you can't, when it's solid and everything, that's when we're going to activate the layer. So we're going to get to the code that makes that happen after this. And then after the animation building. And so what we're going to do is we're going to add on an animator. But we don't have an animator to put our controller to put on here yet, but we will after this. And then we're going to add on a box collider. And we're not going to do anything with this yet because then what we need is a sprite renderer. So we're going to add on Sprite Renderer. And the Sprite Renderer, now the layer order, we're going to put it 5 like our bomb and our Mega Buster bullets. And then what we're going to do with the sprite itself though is we're going to hit the little knob there. And we're going to choose the very first one, so it's only the one segment. So we're going to select that, so that should be magnet beam 00, or you can go over to graphics and drag it on top of this field here. And so there's that. Now with that, if I bring this back over, I'm going to go over here to the center, because there's our beam right now. So what we're going to do is we're going to reset, here's the box collider, so we're going to reset that, so right click on it, reset it, so now the box collider is there. However, the Y we're going to make 4. So now the box collider is in here, so it's on the outer edges and it's right there. So if we zoom in, there it is. You can't really tell, but there's the green line right there. So that's our magnet beam game object, or in this case our platform beam. Now we don't call it magnet beam because we already have a magnet beam. That's the actual item that Mega Man could pick up. So we just call this one platform beam. And so then what we're going to do is we're going to create the script. We're not going to fill the script in yet, but we're going to go over to our scripts folder, and then we're going to go into weapons, and we're going to right click in there, create a C# script, and we're going to call it magnet beam script. And after that, we're going to go back over to our platform beam game object here. Oh, one more thing. On the box collider, you're going to default it to a trigger. So you're going to set that to trigger. And there's no material involved. And so then down here at the bottom, we're over here by add component, we're just going to drag our script onto there. So when we code it out, there's going to be some fields that are in here, but we're going to leave them as the default, so we don't really have to come back here and make any changes to that part of it. The only thing we're going to make a change to is we're going to add on our controller after we create it. So we're going to save that, and now we're going to create the animations. Now, we're only going to do the first 4 animations, because we're going to basically, there's 30 of them, and it's a real pain in the butt. So we're going to do the first 4, and then I'm going to basically do like I did with the image. I'm going to drag it in all the animations with the meta files, and then it'll basically redo everything. And so just so you get an idea of how to do it, and then you can continue on going 5 through 30 if you'd like, or 5 through however many segments long you want it to be. So we're going to go over to our animations folder. We're going to create a new folder. We're going to call it weapons, because we don't have any animated weapons yet. This is actually really our first one, and there might be others. I haven't really paid attention to the other items that the bosses drop, but I think Electman has his electric beams or his thunder beams are all animated, so that'll be something else that can come in here. And then we're going to right click in here and we're going to create a new folder also called magnet beam. So inside of magnet beam folder, we're going to right click. We're going to create a animator controller, and we're going to call it magnet beam. And then we're going to create one animation, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually move that out of the way for right now. So then we're going to create a animation, and we're going to call it magnet beam 1. And so what we're going to do is it's just going to go in sequence. The next one will be 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, etc. And so we're going to go to, first we're going to set this to loop. So all these are going to loop. Even though there's only the one segment on this, we're still going to loop it. And then we're going to go to highlight controller, go to the animator tab, right click, and that didn't work. Right. Oh, wait a minute. I think. There it is. Okay. So there's the magnet beam 1. And we're going to build this out. So you're going to change the samples to just 1. We're going to add on the sprite. So if we go over here to the project, go to the graphics folder, expand out the magnet beam so that you have all 30 segments. We're going to drop on 0, 0. Actually, before we can do that, now that we have an animation controller, go to your platform beam game object, and then go back up into your magnet beam folder and drag on the controller. So now we can do it. So we're going to drop on the first, where's it at? Graphics. We're going to drop on the first magnet beam. So then we can collapse that. So there's our image, and what we're going to do is we're going to add on the box offset and the box size. So we're going to click on the add property, and then what you can do is you can expand the box collider. So we're going to add on the offset, and we're going to hit add property again, and then we're going to add on the size. Now by default, the first segment is all these same values, so we don't have to make any changes. The only thing I'm going to say is just over here, right click and delete all these secondary keys. You don't need those because you only want the one key, and when we add the others, it's only going to be the one. And I'm going to show you how this is going to work as we do the next one. So now if we go, that's our first beam. So we're going to go back over to the animation folder. We're going to highlight magnet beam 1 and Control D on it to duplicate it. So this is our second one. And so if we're going to highlight the animation controller there, go back over to the animator tab, and of course it doesn't behave for me. Double click on the animator controller, highlight the magnet beam 2, right click from selected clip. So there's our second one. So now if we go back over to our platform beam, we're going to select number 2. So here's number 2. So number 2 is going to have a sample rate of 20. And then what we're going to do is we're going to drag on the second graphic. So that's going to be magnet beam 0, 0, and then we're going to put on, hold on a second. We're going to drag on, and we're going to put on number 1. But what we're going to do is if we click here, go back to the first one, we're going to hit record, we're going to change these values. So the offset is going to be 0.16, and then the size is going to be 32. So you're doubling the x offset, and you're doubling the x size, and then you can unrecord that. So now if I bring this over here, I'm going to see what we're going to do. So the box, regardless of it being visible or not visible. The rectangle is what's our actual platform, which is our box collider, which Mega Man can stand on. So regardless of it being shown or not, it's always going to be the same constant width of the platform. So now if we play this, it's going to alternate between the two. So if he happens to stand over here and it happens to be invisible, it doesn't matter because he's still going to have the box collider the full length of the animation. So that's for number 2. So now what we're going to do is we're going to add on the third one. So go back over to your animation, control or highlight Magnet Beam 2, and we're going to control D to duplicate that one. Double click on the animator and just zoom around. Go back over there, highlight the number 3, right click, add that one in there. And you can line these all up nice and pretty. So now on the third one, this is actually going to become 30 samples. And we're going to drag on the third image. So go to graphics, and you're going to want Magnet Beam 02. You're going to drop, select that, and then drop it in there. Boom. And then on here, we're going to do the same thing. You can click over, make sure it's on the first one, hit record, and then you're going to add on 0.08 to this. So this is going to become then 0.24. And then down here, we're going to add on 16, so that's going to be 0.48, and then stop recording. So you can make sure you save that. Bring this over, and now if we just bring it over, so here's our box. That's our full width of our segment of all of our platform. And if we play it, that's basically the 3. So then we're going to stop that. Now we're going to do number 4. Now this is where it gets a little bit different. So we're going to go back up in here to the animation. We're going to duplicate the third one. And then we're going to highlight that. And then we're going to add on number 4. And then highlight the platform beam. So now on this, it's going to be a little bit different. So how this is going to work is you're going to have the last one first, and then it's going to go the previous 2 before that. So in this case, since we're doing 4 beams, we're going to do the 4th, and then it'll be 2, 3, and then it's going to loop around 4, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, and then you'll see the effect. So if we go over to our graphics, we're going to put on number 3 on the first spot, and then we're going to do 1, which is already the same, and 2, which is sure to be the same. It's going to be a little bit different when we get to the others. And then we're going to go to the first and hit record, and then we're going to add on to here. So this is going to be 0.32, and on this 48, this is going to be 64. So stop that. And then we're going to bring this over. Now we're going to check out 4 along. So this is where it starts with 4, and we're going to play that so you can see the effect. So if we step through it, so where it starts is here. So what happens is this would shift off. This is the illusion. This will shift off. This will move forward. So if we move forward 1, it's there. So then the next one should move forward to here. And like we said, we have 1, skip, skip, 1, skip, skip. Next one. And then if we go back, so that's our last, and if we go back here to the beginning, so that one will move over and we add on another one. So that's the effect that we're trying to achieve. So that's done. So all we're going to do is we're going to import all the other ones just to make life a lot easier. So we don't have to build them all out. I'm going to go through each one so you can get all the settings and everything, but I'm not going to spend time building these all out. So I'm going to go over here to my animation folder. I'm just going to right click on this and show and explore. And these are all my current ones, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to close out that, and inside of my folder here I have all of the magnet beams already built out. So what you can do is you can go up to GitHub, same thing like you did with the PNG file and the meta file, and then you can grab all these and download them and import them into yours. Or you can build them out, because I'm going to step through each one so you can see all the settings. And we're going to Control A, Control C on that. And then we're going to paste in here, and we're just going to replace them all. There. The only thing about that replacing it is now that the ID is different, so it lost the controller. So if we just go in here and drag that on there, and then they have them all back. So we're going to preview this. So that's number 1. Number 2. Number 3, which we already saw. Number 4, these are no different. So here's number 4. Okay, so now here's number 5. So number 5, so this is going to be graphic. If we preview it, let's just bring this over a little bit. So that's going to be the image of 04, 02, 03. And so you can just duplicate number 4, and then you're just going to change the graphic on this one. Change all the graphics, and on this first one, you're just going to update the X's on the offset and the size. So this is for number 5. Number 6. So basically, you're just adding 0.08 to the offset and 0.16 to the X on the size. So each one you do, just add 0.08 here and 0.16 here, and those will be the numbers that you just keep going with that. And then over here you have the image. If I preview it, so that's going to be 05. So this should be 3, 4. Number 7. 6, 4, 5. And then just to see this in action. So it's the same concept. As soon as you get to 4, it's the same thing for everything. You're just stepping up the X's and changing which 3 images you're using. So basically, like, take the number -1, that'll be your first one, then -2, and then those will be the next ones. And so number 8. So that's going to be 7, 6, 5, 6, and then these are the values here. Number 9. So 08, 06, 07, and then these are the values there. And then we'll do 10. Stop mumbling and babbling about this, and you can just look it on the screen. 8, and then number 11. And then those values. 12. So 11, 9, 10. And 13. 12, 10, 11. And so on. So you get the idea. I don't think I really need to go through each one of these, but just like I said, offset X add 0.08 each pass, and size X add 0.16. And then whatever this number is, like this is 14. So this should be image 13, and then you should have 11, 12, which will wrap around to 13. So 13, 11, 12. And so if I go all the way up to 30, so that's 29, 27, 28, and these are the values for that. And if we zoom out on this, for 30 segments, this was really long, and play it. So that's the platform for 30 long that we're going to have. So we can stop that. So those are the animations that we're going to use for the platform beam, aka magnet beam. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to do some code. So we're going to drop the code in. So 1 sec, and then we're going to bring those files in. Okay, so I'm going to come over here to meld, and we're going to do it this way and then we're just going to open up in Visual Studio to see it there. So this is going to be in the player controller. So what we're going to do is we're going to add in a new item to our struct, and it's going to be an audio clip. And the audio clip is going to be a sound clip for when the weapon is shot or used. And so like the magnet beam has a sound, the Mega Buster has a sound, the bomb doesn't have an actual sound. When he throws it, it has the explosion, so that one wouldn't actually utilize this field. So that's the first thing we're going to add. So we're going to I'm going to move that over there, but like I said, I'm going to show you in Visual Studio after this is done. So you can see it from there. So that's in the weapon struct. And so then the next change is going to be here. So now we have the layer I was talking about. The layer that we add is called Magnet Beam. This is basically what's going to let Mega Man be able to stand on top of the Magnet Beam once it's not a trigger. So I'll get more into that when we do the actual look at the script for the actual Magnet Beam itself. So we're going to add this in. So we're going to send that over there. And this is basically, so we can basically see if we're colliding with the ground or we're colliding with the magnet beam, these two layers. And this is in the player. So then we're going to come down here. The next thing we're going to add is we have this magnet beam function. This is where we shoot our weapons. So we're going to create a function called magnet beam, but be able to use the magnet beam, we need to put this over into our fire weapon function. And then down here, we have the function itself called magnet beam. And this is where we basically can shoot our magnet beam. So we're going to send that over there. And then coming down here, where we actually, the function that uses the game object to create the magnet beam on screen. So then we're going to add that in there. And then we're going to make a change to our can use weapon again. And this is just a comment change, just instead of now it's plural, so we say flags. And then we say can use weapon is true, but we're also, what we're going to do is we're going to set these to false, which is shooting and is throwing. So I'm going to save that. I can leave that open. Actually, we'll close that. And then here, we're going to, this is the actual magnet beam script itself, which we have absolutely nothing in it yet. So I'm just going to drop all this and we'll look at the inside of Visual Studio so we can just go out line by line. So we're just going to put all of it in there. And that shouldn't even have been there, that's extra line. There. Now they're the same, then we can save that and we can close melt. And then we're going to open up Visual Studio and go take a look at this stuff. Okay, so player controller we'll take a look at after. Let's just start with the magnet beam script itself. And that's not going to be opened yet because we have to get to it from here. So we're going to go over to, we're going to wait for this to finish. Okay, so if we go into scripts and weapons, we're going to open up the magnet beam. Alright, so this is our new script, the magnet beam. Alright, so first thing we needed was we're going to be using events. Now, much like the hyper bomb, we use events to know when the beam has done something. In this case, our event is that the beam has been locked on the screen. So this is how we're going to know whether we can start applying it, making it solid or not. So what we're going to have here is we're going to add in these three, an animator, a box collider, and a sprite renderer. Although you can see the sprite renderer is grayed out, which means we didn't actually use it, but it's in here in case we ever wanted to use it for something. So we use these. We need to get these components off of our platform beam game object, which we attached the script to it already. And then we have some time bars. We need to know when the beam started to be created. Now, as I mentioned earlier, when you hold down the fire key or the shoot key on the keyboard, the longer you hold it, the longer the beam gets. So you need to know when you started firing and basically when you stop firing to know how long your beam is going to end up being. So this is basically going to capture when we started the script. So that's when basically the game object has been created, and then we'll know, and then this will be where we can calculate how long it's been running for. The beam time will be how long we've been holding that fire key down, so it's really, this is always going to be greater or than or equal to this value. And max beam time, this is for how long we want the button to be able to be held down for until it stops doing something. We'll get to that, the point of that. Then we have two bools here. One's called is solid and the other's called is locked. Now is solid is a flag to whether our beam is solid and Mega Man can stand on top of it. And is locked is to know whether the beam is still moving around. Like I haven't released the shoot key yet, and so it's following Mega Man around, or it's been locked and it's now off of his Megabus or off of his cannon, and now it's stuck on the screen with a lifetime that'll die at some point. And then we need access to our player because we need to know where the player is and where the bullet shoot position is and things like that. So we're going to get access to our player. And as I said, this is the locked event, so this is to know as soon as that beam's been locked into place, this goes back over to our player controller, says, hey, it's been locked on the screen. So it's kind of a flag to know, okay, now we can use our weapon again. If we have the energy to do so, that is. Next thing is our destroy time. Destroy times are going to be defaulted to 3 seconds. I don't know exactly, I didn't really time it in the game, but I think 3 seconds is good enough for our beam to stay on the screen before it vanishes. And so that'll be the time delay before our beam decides to go poof. Next one's going to be the beam direction, much like everything else that we have. Our beam's going to default to right because our player defaults facing right. So if you go left, then obviously this vector will go the other way, and we know that in our sprite sheet we have the pivot on the left center, so therefore it's always going to be like left boom. So it's always on the left side of it, so if we flip it, then it'll be the opposite way. Maximum segments. We have 30 segments. You can actually change this over in the script if you want. If you don't want to use all 30, say you want to max out at 20 or something, or you want to have some sort of cool little feature in your game where you get penalized and you can only have segments of 10 or 20 or whatever, then you can basically alter this. So this is basically a flag to know how many segments we can have at one time. 30 being the most because that's all our sprite sheet accommodates. And if you want to build it out, you can add to it if you want. And then here's our awake function. And in our awake function, we get access to the animator, the box 2D, and the sprite. And we get those off of our platform beam game object. And then here's our start function. In our start function, as I said, when this thing starts up, we're going to get the time that it starts at. So we're going to store that in start time. By default, once this thing starts up, it's always going to be the very first magnet beam. So we're going to call the animator's play and play that animation of just the one beam segment. And then we're going to get the player object that's basically based off the tag player. And then we're going to store that in our variable here. And then this is our update loop. Let me see, we want to talk about the update. Well, let's hold off on the update. Let's come down here. So we have these functions that we can basically call set destroy time, or destroy delay. So we can pass these when we're creating it over in the player controller or wherever else. This destroy delay will be basically how long the magnet beam will stay on screen. By default, like I said, it's 3, but unless you call this, you can pass it a different value. Set direction, same thing, defaults to right, and if it's not right, say the player's facing the other way, then you're going to want to call this so that it flips, and that's what it will do here. So we'll call the transform, the rotate, and it'll flip it 180 degrees so it's facing the opposite direction. And updating however many maximum segments. So now up here in our update, what we do is we check to see if the beam is locked or not. If it's not locked, then we're stuck in this section here to do this code. Otherwise, we'll go down here and do this. So if it's not locked, what we want to do is we want to check our beam time, and if our beam time is less than our max beam time, which we defaulted to 3 seconds, and then what we're going to do here is we're going to calculate our beam time. How long has the beam been on the screen for? And so we're going to do time minus the start time, and we're going to use this clamp thing so it's always stuck between 0.01 and the maximum, which is 3. And these numbers play a point because this is going to determine how long our beam is based off how long it's been on screen for. And so, so then we have our beam time. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our beam time and times it by 10. So if we have, say, 1 second, it'll be 10. If it's 2 seconds, it'd be 20. And if it's 3 seconds, it'd be 30. So that's how we calculate how many segments. And if it's a fraction of 0.01 or whatever, then we just times this and we convert it to an integer. So it's always going to be an integer of how many segments it is. And then what we want to see is if our segments is greater than max segments, then we want to make sure it never goes above max segments. So we cap that off. And then this is where the magic is. So we call our animator play again, and we just say magnet beam, and we have that number, however many segments. That's why we named our animations 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, etc., all the way up to 30. So we just take our segments variable here, use toString, so we convert that integer to a string, and we tack that onto magnet beam, and that's the name of our animation that we're going to play. So as we're holding this key down, right? So if it's over 30, then we don't have to play this animation anymore because it's already been maxed out at 30, or if you have a different one, a different number of segments that you want to use, or a different beam time that you want, then we won't execute this anymore. So once it gets up to 3 seconds and then it goes beyond that, we don't really need to call this anymore. It's done being called. So now we have our beam. The beam's on our cannon. We're moving around with it. We can jump with it until we release it, or if it happens to touch a ground or a wall. And so once it does that, they'll become locked. So this is when we're not locked. Now it's locked. So what we want to do is the player null? Now we'll get to why we need to do this when we go look at the player controller, but the player can't be null, because otherwise you're going to have a problem and it's trying to lock into position. You're going to get a null reference because the player's not there, and therefore you can't check and see if the beam is there or not. It's because it's off of the bullet shoot position. So player can't be null, must not be null to be able to execute all this. So here's the fun stuff with the platform. Full of typos. So if the players transform Y, now let me back up real quick. You could use the platform effector one way, but the problem with the platform effector one way is when Mega Man jumps, and as soon as his feet touch that bottom part, he's basically going to switch to his ground mode. So he's going to switch animations to like his idle. But the problem is his velocity he still has velocity, so he's going to go up. So it's going to have this flicker in an animation of him showing that he's showing his idle, but he's still moving up, and he's going to come back down and then land on the beam. So using the platform effector really didn't work. And so what I do is I'm checking the Y position of Mega Man in relation to the Y position of the platform beam here. So if my Y is greater than the platform's Y plus the extents of the Y, which basically we know that our pivot is in the middle center, right? Well, the bounds of the extents Y is always half of the size of the box. So our Y plus half should be the very top of our box collider. So we want to see if Mega Man, his Y is above that. And if it is above that, then we also want to check and make sure that his velocity, so you kind of have the same problem when you're going up, it's still going to flicker, but what we do here is we check and see if our velocity is less than 0, which basically means if it's less than 0, that means he's coming down. So we don't want to lock it yet until we know he's basically coming down, or he's at no velocity at all. So if he's still moving up, he's got a positive, and we don't want to do anything until he becomes negative or equal to 0. So once he's coming down and about to land on that platform beam, we're going to check and see if it's not solid, which it shouldn't be. So it shouldn't be solid yet. So if it's not solid, we're going to turn it to solid, and by default it's a trigger, so we're going to say it's not a trigger, and then we're going to add on our magnet beam layer to that platform beam. So we're going to change the layer from default to magnet beam, and we know that magnet beam is solid for Mega Man to use as something he can stand on. And so now he's on top of it. Now let's assume that, okay, now he's below it. So if he's below the Y position, or if he jumps, he's still above it, and he lands on it, same deal. So if he's below it, then he's below the Y position, then we're going to see we should be solid, and we're going to turn solid back to not solid, make it a trigger again, and set the layer back to default so that he can pass through it. So that's the magic of turning it into a solid versus it not being solid. So then we already took a look at these, and now down here, lock beam. So to lock the beam, what we're going to do is we're going to flag that it's locked, and because the beam is going to be a child of the bullet shoot position, so it follows his cannon around, we're going to detach it. So we say the parent is null, so now it's no longer a child of his bullet shoot position, And what we happen to do here is if we do set a destroy delay greater than 0, then we want to make this thing disappear. But if it is 0, then you can make it where it stays permanently. So that's why we have this little check here. And then what you can do is you're going to call your locked event. So locked event is going to go talk back to the player controller. So that's when you lock the beam. And then the other thing is, then what we're going to do is trigger enter duty. And trigger enter duty is what we're going to do is we're going to look and see if when we basically create a magnet beam and if it extends or we jump and it happens to touch a ground layer and it's not locked, we're going to lock it by calling this up here. Now I've been mentioning that we have about the same thing with walls, but we don't actually have a wall that we use for as a collider yet. So if you needed to add that in there, then you can basically put this in, and maybe later down the road we'll actually be making changes to this so that we would collide with a wall layer. But right now all we're going to do is we're going to be checking to see if this platform beam collides with the ground. So that is basically the script for the magnet beam itself. So it's a very small script, very simple, you'll see it in action when we're done. So player controller, back up to the top here. And so what we did here is we added in a audio clip called weapon clip, right? So we want to be able to tag or tie in audio for the weapons that we use, and this is the way we can keep track of which got what has what. And then let me see. And then here we added on our layer that we're going to be testing to see if we've collided with or not. And if we are, then it's the same thing. We're going to basically execute over on the ground now. It's just now we're going to be looking to see if we've touched this layer as well as our standard ground layer. And let me see here. What else do we have changes? So then we added in the magnet beam for our fire weapons. We have this function here called magnet beam. And there's our Mega Buster, there's our Hyper Bomb, and now here is our magnet beam. So let's talk about this real quick. So same variables that we used before, how long we've been shooting for, and how long is the if we release the release time length. So what we do here is if we're shooting and the key has been released and can use the weapon, then we want to be able to shoot a beam out. And so what we do here is we're going to check and see the current energy level of our magnet beam if it's greater than 0. And I think I haven't mentioned this yet, we want to make sure that we can only have 3 beams on the screen at one time. So we're going to basically, that's why we have that tag. So we're going to look for this tag platform beam and we're going to see how many of them are on the screen. And we're going to check the length on that. So if it's less than 3 and we have energy, then we want to execute our code to be able to create another magnet beam. So if that passes validation, then we're going to shoot. We're going to say that we can't use the weapon, at least not yet. And our key release is nope, because we got our key down at the moment. And start shoot time, etc. So we can calculate time variables and things like that. And then we're going to call our function here that says shoot magnet beam, which actually creates the magnet beam. And then this is what we created in the last video, which was for the hyper bomb. So we're going to spend our weapon energy, and the weapon energy on the magnet beam is actually 2. You spend 2 units of energy when you fire it. And then we're going to refresh our energy bar so that it takes those, keeps deducting those 2 every time we use it. So the little black area gets bigger. And then what we're going to do here is if we're not shooting and we haven't released, then we're going to see how long it's been for. And then down here we're going to say if we're shooting but we stop letting, we let go of the shoot key, then that means that we're going in, obviously it hasn't collided with a ground, so then it hasn't already locked in place automatically. So if we let go of shoot, then we're no longer shooting. And this is where we're going to look for our bullet shoot position, which actually is this platform beam is actually a child of that. And we're going to save it over here and we're going to make sure it's not null. And then what we're going to do is we're going to call lock beam. And so that's the point of having to make sure that the player isn't null either. because otherwise this whole thing basically crashes it out. And then past all that, we come down here to shoot magnet beam. So what we're going to do is we're going to instantiate a copy of the prefab. We're going to update the name. We're going to set its position to the position of our bullet shoot position, and then we're going to set the parent to the bullet shoot position's transform, so that this beam is a child of the bullet shoot position. And then down here we're going to call those functions off of our magnet beam script. So we're going to say by default our set destroy delay is 3 seconds. Set the direction based off of which way Mega Man is facing. So if he's facing right, we want vector 2.right, otherwise vector 2.left. We're going to default to maximum of 30 segments. And then we're going to tack on, just like we did with the hyper bomb, we're going to put on our listener to our locked event, can we use the weapon again function. And then what we're going to do down here is we're going to play the sound clip from our structure. So we don't use the Mega Buster. We may update this later, but for right now we have it for so it's working with the clip that's on the magnet beam. And so after that, now if we come down here, this is the last change that we had, can use weapon again. So all we did in here was we added in our is shooting or is throwing to false. And the reason we do this is because if we still have it held down and say the beam, and we haven't let go yet, but the beam collides with the ground or a wall or something like that, in this case only the ground, then it's still going to think we're shooting and it's going to cause all kinds of problems. So by setting this basically locked event basically calls this, and it's going to automatically set these to false so that in the original shoot functions they'll fall through to the next block of code that thinks that, oh, we let go of the key. So that's kind of like the catch with the catch part with these things. So those are the changes that we do for the player controller, and that was the magnet beam script. So if we go back over to here, we have some more changes that we need to make, and it actually has to do with the platform beam and some other items. So if I go look at my platform beam here, and we already have the magnet beam, we have all this set up, and now we go down here, now we already have some values in here for our magnet beam script. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a prefab out of this guy. So we're going to go into our prefabs, weapons, and we're going to drop in platform beam. So now we have a prefab of this. And if I open it up, there's my prefab, and we can actually bring that back over, and we can get out of there. And then we can delete that out of the scene. So we're going to save that. The remaining changes I'm going to make have to do with these prefabs. So, and the, so the prefabs for the magnet beam, let's see here, the items prefabs for the magnet beam and the Yoshichi. So the magnet beam, what we're going to do is I'm going to add on an audio clip for that, so when it gets collected. I didn't have one before. It was just if you capture it, it's silent, and what we're going to use is actually the one-up sound. So we're going to go over here to audio and sounds, and it's number 25. We're going to put that on to when this item gets collected, it's going to play this sound. And we're going to do the same thing, and I've never played the game that many times to be able to capture a Yoshichi, but I'm pretty sure it'll have a sound too, so we're just going to do the same thing. So in the audio clip, we're going to use the sounds number 25 for the one-up and drop that in there. And we're going to save that. And then the next one we're going to edit is actually the player prefab, because now we have all these other items in here. Okay, so our magnet beam. But before we do the magnet beam, we want the audio. So like I said, right now the audio for the Mega Buster is actually inside of the player himself somewhere else, like down here somewhere, which is shoot bullet clip here, but we may change that out at some point so we don't do it that way. And so what we're going to do is we're going to put number 5 here on our structure. So element 0 megabuster, we're going to put in the sound clip there. And our hyper bomb, we don't have a sound clip for that, which is fine. But on our magnet beam, we need our prefab that we created, and we need our audio clip, and we need to know how much energy that we use. So what we're going to do is we're going to set, so whenever we use our magnet beam, it's going to deduct 2 energy. It's going to cost 2 energy units. And so on our sound, what our sound is going to be is actually on number 17 called beam. And we're going to drop that into there. And then we need our prefab from weapons, which is our platform beam. And we're going to drop that there. So then we can save that. And those are the changes that we're going to make to our player prefab. And just to double check, if we look at our regular player here, it should carry over. There's the audio, there's the 2 on the magnet beam, the sound, the prefab, and we don't care about the sound. There is no sound for the hyperbomb except when it explodes, not when you throw it. So that all done. Let's extend this out a little bit. So we're going to take this thing for a roll now and see if it worked, if I missed anything, and it should be playing the way that we expect it to be playing. So let's play it. Okay, so I'm going to kill this guy. Cool. So I'm going to press S, and you can see I'm just stuck on my standard Mega Buster, but now I'm going to collect the magnet beam. Give me 1 second. Okay, so there's the 1-up sound. So we collected the magnet beam, so now I'm going to press S. So there, magnet beam's activated, and I got the power, or the energy bar. So I'm going to press C. There's my magnet beam, and I've pressed it once. So now I'm going to hold it down. And there it's growing. It should max out at 30 there. I'm going to move back and forth. I'm going to jump with it. So it's following around my bullet shoot position. And then if I let go of C, it should be locked now. So I can get on it. Let me do that again. So I can run through it. It's not solid until I end up above it. So that's where, if it's solid or not, comes into play. And flag adding on the turning it from a trigger to a not to a trigger, and then adding on the layer. So I'm going to extend this out again. I'm going to jump and land a little like right there, and I should be able to get on it. Jump up, and get on top. So this is the thing. I'm going to do this real quick. I was talking about earlier. So let's kill this guy. I'm just going to switch to that. And so this is what I was talking about. So if you actually extend this out and get on top of it, we're actually going to go past our transition. And I just fell through, but I'm actually on the next platform. So that's something you can see how you're going to figure out how to get past that. It's not a bug, but it's just something you have to take into account now that you haven't, you can actually get beyond your transition. So anyway, so that is the magnet beam. Play it one more time. Why not? So let's kill this guy, collect it, switch to it. I can get up on this. I'm not able to quite jump up above it. So that's one of the things. So we do this. Oops. See, it's colliding with the ground there, so that's what stopped. I still had it held down. I was able to make it up to the top there. So let's go over. I'm just gonna. Oh, that's what I forgot to do. Okay. So I'm gonna get hit with it. So if I hold I'm still holding it down. You see that my bullet shoot position stayed in there instead of going down to where my feet were. And if I did get to the feet, it would just lock right there. We don't want that to happen. So this is where if I'm holding this down and I die with this magnet beam, it's basically going to cause a null. It would have caused a null if my player was a null. That bit in the magnet beam script. Let's just kind of get this guy killed real quick, so we can see while it's extended what happens. We should get no null reference errors. Anyway, so that's the magnet beam. So now we have one more weapon to our arsenal. Even though it's not really a weapon, but it's a utility item. So that brings us to the end of this video. So I've been thinking about what the next one's going to be, and actually what I was thinking of is we're going to do the weapons video, or the, I'm sorry, it's going to be a weapons menu video. So we're going to do the weapons menu. So when you press the weapons menu, the box pops out on the screen, and it's got to show you all the weapons that are available to choose from. And we're going to basically be able, instead of pressing S key on the keyboard to just switch automatically, to cycle through what we have, we're going to press S, and it's going to pop up that menu on the screen, and we can pick from there and switch to the weapon that we want. So we're going to do that one next. So if you like the video, give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed yet, you can subscribe. I try to put out a video every week, but now that we're getting towards the end, these little expansions are getting a little tad more complicated and more time consuming. So, but little by little, we're going to get Mega Man done. And so I bid you adieu and have a good day. Stay safe out there, and I will catch you at the next video. Bye.